How long can any company actually own the frontier? Alibaba open-hosted access to a 2.4 trillion parameter model Monday and promised downloadable weights just next week, only the latest in an incredible surge of highly capable open-weight models. Here's the claim I'll stand behind. The frontier is already obsolete each time a proprietary lab says that they've reached it with the new release. But the mistake is in believing that the frontier can be permanently owned for increasingly meaningless monetary profit. The real value is in how far it moves the whole field and the whole world forward. Come with me, let's get into it. Alibaba opened broad access to Qwen 3.8-Max on Monday. It's a multimodal model with 2.4 trillion parameters. People can work with it through QwenWork, Alibaba's new workplace agent platform, which entered public beta on the web and desktop. Alibaba says that it can turn long documents, TV series, even live streams into searchable knowledge bases. It can also recreate software from screenshots, generate interactive games, educational animations, and turn flat floor plans into three-dimensional views. Now, those are Alibaba's descriptions of its own system. The more important fact today is how people get that capability. Right now, they can reach it through Alibaba's servers. The company controls the terms and the machines and whether that access even continues, but they did promise downloadable weights next week. If Alibaba delivers, the relationship changes. Hosted access lets you work with a model, yes. Downloadable weights, though, lets you possess it. Researchers can then inspect the model, adapt it, and run it without a connection that Alibaba can revoke. Now, that promise arrives in the middle of a serious debate about how fast access should widen. On Friday, Thinking Machines Labs published what it called a safe path to open weights. Now, the lab has already released their first two models, Inkling and Inkling Small. Now, its new framework lays out a series of steps that can come before anyone downloads the model itself. A lab could start with a monitored API, for example, or it could offer hosted fine-tuning, or it could give early access to vetted defenders who look for vulnerabilities before everyone else gets the weights, similar to Anthropic's Project Glasswing approach. Now, Thinking Machines did substantial testing before its own releases. It built an internal list of possible harms. Scale AI, Handshake AI, Far.ai, and Apollo Research reviewed the models from outside the lab, and the team also fine-tuned them in ways designed to expose their worst capabilities. Thinking Machines concluded then that neither model added dangerous capability beyond what people could already download elsewhere. So publishing that process is really useful. Other labs can then repeat it, challenge it, compare their own results against it. The harder part is who actually holds the clock. Under this ladder, the lab chooses the tests, reads the results, and decides when everyone else is ready. Early access goes to organizations that the lab selects. Those organizations get time to learn and prepare while everyone else has to wait. Now, the safety problem behind this is substantial. Once weights spread, they cannot be called back. Strong cyber, chemistry, or biology skills could let someone cause harm with less expertise than used to be needed. And on Friday, a Reuters review found that researchers linked to China's People's Liberation Army had used outputs from OpenAI and Anthropic models to train defense systems. Now, that could be misconstrued as a strong argument for keeping powerful capability behind a gate. But it also shows the gate's limit. Those researchers used model outputs while the underlying weights remained controlled. Useful knowledge had already crossed the boundary. Meanwhile, capability itself keeps appearing in more than one place. On Saturday, Anthropic engineer Levant Appelgay said that Anthropic's Fable system produced proposed solutions to 5 of the 10 math problems that OpenAI attributed to its unreleased Astra model. He said it did that within 24 hours. Now, both labs' results still need broader review, of course, but even with that caveat, the overlap is significant. OpenAI reported a major mathematical result from a model it hasn't released. Within a day, a rival system had reportedly reproduced half of it. Yesterday, we covered here that Huawei released the weights for OpenPangu 2.0 Pro, a model trained outside the NVIDIA ecosystem. On Sunday, Moonshot released the weights for Kimi, which is described as the largest open-weight model yet by total parameter count. And now Alibaba says that its own 2.4 trillion parameter model will become downloadable within days. One model can remain gated. One company can hold the lead for a little while, but the larger pattern keeps moving toward possession. The public tests should get stronger. Yes, independent scrutiny should grow. Yes, a gate protecting against a specific danger may earn its place for a limited time, but that time has to be justified, and it just isn't right now. The lab can't simply appoint itself permanent owner of the frontier when rivals are reproducing the capability and downloadable models keep arriving from every different direction. The lead keeps becoming an interval. And that means something foundational in our whole approach to who should be given access and when, how, and why should be given a serious look. All right, moving away here. Follow that expanding capability into the physical world, and the pressure has reached one of electronics' least glamorous and most necessary layers. Indian manufacturers reported Sunday that high-end AI servers are absorbing printed circuit board capacity. So a printed circuit board is the base that chips and other components actually sit on physically. You'll find one in nearly every single electronic device. According to Elsina, an Indian electronics industry group, global suppliers have raised board prices by more than 20%. Several pressures are landing at once. AI servers need more high-end boards. Shipping through West Asia has been disrupted, and an Iranian strike reportedly hit a Saudi facility that industry reports said supplied roughly 80% of the global market for an unnamed specialty chemical that is used in these board manufacturings. And the raw materials are getting more expensive, too. Elsina says that low bromine epoxy resin rose about 70% over the past 8 or 9 months. A widely used glass cloth doubled in price. Copper foil climbed by more than 30%. That squeeze reaches far beyond just data centers. Demand for smart meters, power management gear, and electric vehicle systems is growing by 30 to 40%. So the same board factories and materials support both AI compute and the equipment needed to electrify the wider economy. The largest buyers can lock in supply and negotiate priority. Smaller manufacturers have much less leverage, though. They face higher prices, delayed production, and whatever allocation remains after the biggest customers have been served. So that's where the transition's cost lands first. India also imports all of its photoresists, which help manufacturers print circuit patterns onto the boards. For several plating and etching chemicals, the country can currently supply only 20 to 40% of its own needs. But the shortage is pulling a response forward, too. More than 150 billion rupees in component investment is moving through a national support program, and that includes 12 to 14 approved plants for bare circuit boards. Surma SGS says that construction of its proposed facility is 70% complete, and it plans trial production early next year and commercial output during the 27-28 fiscal year. Wipro and Surma are also building India's first plants for copper-clad laminate, which is a basic board material as well. So AI demand is exposing a very fragile industrial layer, and in the near term, smaller buyers bear much of that squeeze. Over time, the new chemical, laminate, and board capacity can also serve electric vehicles, grid equipment, medical devices, and even ordinary electronics. So a component that was almost invisible has become important enough to have to actually build around. All right, moving over here. Circuit boards solve one physical constraint, but electricity is the larger one, and China is approaching it at fleet scale. Regulatory filings posted on Friday show that China approved 8 Hualong-1 nuclear reactors across Guangdong, Liaoning, Zhejiang, and Shandong. Each reactor is rated at a little over 1,100 megawatts, so together, the 8 would add more than 9 gigawatts of carbon-free generation. The reported investment tops 175 billion won, which is about $25 billion. Several units will demonstrate the updated Hualong-1 2.0 design. CGN Power, China National Nuclear Power, and SPIC Industry Finance are leading the projects. But the key here is repetition. China already has 10 Hualong-1 reactors generating electricity. Another 37 have been approved or are under construction. At Taipingling, the first 2 units entered commercial operation this year. 2 more are under construction, and the latest approval adds units 5 and 6 at that same site. Build the same reactor again and again, and every project can feed the next one. Crews train on familiar systems. Suppliers make repeat components. Operators carry knowledge from one site to another. That is the difference between proving a design once and building a whole fleet. China's nuclear additions already show up in global totals, too. Nuclear plants worldwide generated a record amount of electricity in 2025. China contributed more than 34 terawatt-hours of the new output. Data in the Statistical Review of World Energy indicate that global nuclear generation would have fallen without that addition. Still, nuclear supplies only about 3.3% of China's total electricity. The country's operating fleet stood near 61 gigawatts at the end of 2024, below its earlier 70 gigawatt goal. Its current national targets call for 110 gigawatts by 2030 and 200 by 2035. Those remain targets. Friday's approval, though, begins years of construction, commissioning, and safety review to try to get there. Electricity will reach the grid only after that work. The direction is very clear. China is pairing the world's largest wind and solar system with power that remains available when that weather changes. That foundation can serve factories, transportation, homes, and rising compute demand together. The important advance is the repeatable system for building it. All right, from the infrastructure around AI, let's move into two laboratories redesigning how industry treats waste. Two papers published on Monday in Nature Communications share one simple idea. Every output from a chemical process might become an input for something useful. The first system turns nitrate-polluted wastewater into ammonia under ordinary temperatures and pressures. That pairing links water cleanup with fertilizer production. Nitrate contaminates water while ammonia supplies the nitrogen that's used in fertilizer. Industry usually makes ammonia through the very energy-intensive Haber-Bosch process. This cell cleans the water and recovers the nitrogen. It reached nearly 100% Faradaic efficiency. That means almost all the electrical current drove the intended reaction instead of being lost to side reactions such as producing hydrogen. A prototype flow system ran at industrial current density for 300 hours and lost less than 3% of its activity. It produced potable water alongside the ammonia. A second membrane-based setup held the same current density for 380 hours. The catalyst joins molybdenum, copper, and carbon at an atomic interface. That interface then weakens the nitrate molecule's nitrogen-oxygen bond. Carbon pathways then move and balance electrons as the reaction runs, helping the cell stay selective even under heavy current. The second paper redesigns the whole electrochemical cell around formamide, which is an industrial building block. An electrochemical cell has two electrodes. Usually, one side makes the valuable product while the other splits water or produces something with very little value. This system makes formamide at both electrodes. Even better, each side produces byproducts that travel across the cell and feed the reaction on the other side. Copper nanosheet channels keep a strongly alkaline zone within 100 nanometers of the cathode while the rest of the liquid stays neutral, and that lets two very different chemical reactions coexist. The researchers reported nearly 100% selectivity for both carbon and nitrogen. Now, both systems remain lab demonstrations. Researchers still need to prove the energy costs, the product separation costs, reactor scale, and of course, continuous operation with messy waste streams that change from day to day. But the design shift is already visible. The counter electrode no longer has to spend energy doing low-value work. Wastewater becomes a chemical source. One reaction's leftovers feed the next reaction. The unused half of the process is becoming another production line. All right, our final story takes that same idea of reprogramming into biology, and this time, researchers changed what one of nature's most destructive molecules attacks. A paper published Monday in Nature Biotechnology describes proteases evolved from botulinum neurotoxin serotype X. Botulinum toxin causes botulism and also supplies the active agent in Botox. It works by using a protein-cutting enzyme to attack precise targets in nerve cells, producing paralysis. The researchers kept that cutting ability and changed its target. They used phage-assisted continuous evolution, or PACE. The method rapidly mutates proteins over many generations and keeps the versions that perform a chosen molecular task. Here, the selection system rewarded enzymes that cut procaspase-1, a protein that is involved in cell death. At the same time, it penalized enzymes that still cut VAMP1, one of the toxin's natural targets. The redesigned XPC protease lost activity against all 4 known native substrates of botulinum X, yet it cut procaspase-1 only about 5 times less efficiently than the original toxin cut its natural target. And that's a really sharp redirection. So what I'm saying is the molecular blade still works, but now it recognizes a different and a better mark. Now the team also evolved variants that activate Gasdermin D. Together, these targets can trigger inflammatory and programmed cell death, pathways that tumors often suppress. One variant opened the cell membrane through lytic death. Another activated both lytic and apoptotic pathways. The researchers then reattached the evolved enzymes to the toxin's natural translocation domain. That part of the toxin acts as a delivery system, carrying the redesigned protease into mammalian cells. Across several cancer cell lines in culture, the resulting molecules strongly killed cancer cells, while sparing non-cancerous cells. That is the payoff. In a drug-resistant mouse model of pancreatic ductal adenocarcinoma, expression of the procaspase-1 variant slowed tumor growth. This form of pancreatic cancer remains among the hardest cancers to treat. The result is preclinical. Researchers still have to study human safety, immune reactions, dosing, delivery across different tumors, and the inflammation caused by lytic cell death. But even so, the capability change is extraordinary. Directed evolution took machinery inherited from a neurotoxin, removed its old targets, gave it new ones, and reused the toxin's own delivery system to carry the rewritten payload. Biology handed us a weapon. Evolution in the lab turned its parts into a possible therapy. All right, bringing it to a close for today. Alibaba can control access to Qwen3.8-Max for today. If the promised weights arrive, then people will be able to possess and adapt the model without asking Alibaba to keep their server running. That doesn't erase the danger, though, of downloadable capability. Thinking Machines is right that public weights cannot be recalled. Its repeatable testing process helps because outsiders can then examine and improve it. Still, safety work cannot become a permanent license for one lab to decide who gets capability. The case for any delay has to be specific, independently checked, and limited to the danger that it actually addresses. The frontier keeps reproducing across labs too quickly for indefinite ownership to ever hold. And then comes the physical foundation. AI demand is straining the boards beneath nearly every electronic device. Smaller manufacturers are carrying more of that cost. The same pressure is also pulling new factories, chemical capacity, and laminate production into existence. China's reactor approvals show the energy side of that build-out. The electricity will take years to arrive, but repeating one design across a growing fleet creates knowledge and supply chains that compound with every project. And in the lab, scientists are learning to rewrite the jobs that matter itself performs. Wastewater becomes fertilizer and clean water. A cell's neglected electrode becomes a second production line. A neurotoxin loses its inherited target and gains a route into cancer cells. Now, none of these transitions is finished. Open weights do still carry risks. New factories take time. Approved reactors still have to be built safely. The chemistry has to survive industrial economics, and the cancer therapy has to survive the much harder test of human biology. But the direction runs through all 5 stories. Control gives way to possession. Waste becomes a supply. Repetition turns a demonstration into infrastructure. Inherited functions become editable. The frontier is starting to look less like a place anyone can own, and more like a capability that keeps escaping every fixed definition of who gets to build next, and accelerating the pace for everyone instead. See you tomorrow.